Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our CAPSLOCK masterclass this afternoon of Speaking Up, the importance of every voice in the room. So just as a quick way of introduction, CAPSLOCK, we have 3 co-founders. 2 of us are here at the moment. Jonathan is going around and meeting some people at the moment, but I'm sure you'll see him at some point. But just to introduce ourselves, my name's Lorna Armitage. I'm one of the CAPSLOCK co-founders. My background, very briefly, because I don't want to put you all to sleep, is in both cyber security and education. So I've worked as a senior academic for a number of years, previously alongside Andrea, but also as a consultant in cyber for well over 20 years now in both the public and private sector.
Hi, I love going second because I've got a different name, but apart from that, the rest of it is pretty much the same. So we'll save boring you with my background too, and just say ditto, apart from I'm Andrea. So straight on to the topic. So in terms of diversity, you probably already know that cyber as a sector is really, really not very diverse at all. Mostly men, mostly white men, mostly white men of a certain age. But I think in terms of how diversity happens or doesn't happen in certain sectors, it's important to look back through why it is how it is in some ways. I think some of it is that we keep doing the same things, but expecting somehow for it to look or feel slightly different. You know, we still keep talking in the same way to the same sorts of people and expect a different result. In terms of kind of the socioeconomics of getting into certain sectors or being in a certain role, unemployment's a little bit of a cycle. So if you come from an unemployed household, then you are 10 times more likely to become unemployed yourself. So your background definitely has an impact on where you end up being. Gender stereotypes, in essence as well, are very difficult to change. So if you've got an image of what a cybersecurity professional looks like, for example, then you probably think it perhaps doesn't look like me, it perhaps doesn't look like Lorna, and perhaps you don't feel it looks like you either. So it can be difficult to change some of these stereotypes. In terms of barriers as well, at CAPSLOCK, perhaps it's interesting to say we're all about removing as many barriers as we possibly can and helping anybody access education if they've got a passion and a desire to change their lives. But higher education, going to university, is related to how much you're likely to earn in the future. So if you don't go, you're likely to earn less. So your past education definitely has a huge bearing on what your future looks like. And I guess for us, it's important for us to look at how we might kind of change that message, that language. I think in essence as well, inequalities, as we know, in terms of healthcare, in terms of which bit of the UK or otherwise you grew up in, certainly inequalities there. So professionals from working class backgrounds are paid less than professionals from other backgrounds.
I think, unfortunately, as well, I mean, this is not just society, not just cyber. This is society in general that we're talking about. You know, almost all sectors have these issues with diversity as well. Some more than others, but cyber, you know, particularly has a problem.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess one of the old ones, age has an impact on perceived skills. So it's perceived that if you're older, you're going to be less technically capable than a younger person. So perception has a massive impact on how things happen.
So I guess looking at this, have you ever, there's some examples here, have you ever walked into a room where everybody suddenly shuts up? Have you ever been told promotion isn't for you, that you felt you've been silenced or not listened to? I'm not going to read them all, but, you know, experienced eye rolls, being ignored, patronised, belittled, talked over, you know, actually, because if you've actually ever been through these, then you have been marginalised at some point. If you've never been through any of these, then sorry to say, guys, you're probably a white man. Because generally the white men get away with it. You know, they don't seem to have these issues as much. I am generalising, of course. But, you know, all of these things actually are a way of marginalising people. Sometimes we do that consciously, sometimes we do it subconsciously. We all have learned behaviours. You know, that actually, you know, we're growing up, whether it's from our upbringing, our parents, our schooling, whatever that might be, the influences on us, we all do have these learned behaviours.
But I think in terms of how you've experienced it, it definitely manifests itself in a lot of different ways. So it can be that people don't share information with others, you know, with people that are not like themselves. It can be sitting in different bits of the office or going for lunch together where you're not included. It can be being silenced, or your ideas rejected or ignored, or it can be actually somebody playing back your ideas as if they were theirs, and all of a sudden they're more acceptable. You can be discouraged to break any gender norms, so you don't seek promotion. It's not for you. You should be at home. You should be doing other things.
Yeah.
Being made to feel uncomfortable. This is not your space. I don't know whether as a woman you've ever walked into a garage where it's all dirty, oily and greasy and thought, I don't fit here. Or as a man walked into a salon and thought, I don't know where to sit. It doesn't look for me. So marginalisation can happen in so many different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. The credibility being questioned, things like that. You know, I often tell the story of myself and Andrea. As academics, we've got quite a lot of published work, and one of our research areas was social engineering. And we were once approached by a colleague, distant colleague, but a colleague all the same, man who explained our research paper to us, which was an interesting conversation to be had there. But, yeah. So it happens in all sorts of different forms.
As part of that, we looked at kind of trying to quantify it a little bit, you know, trying to decide, is this just us imagining it? Are we just sitting here, everything's fine, but actually our experience is telling us it isn't?
Yeah.
So we looked at doing a tally.
Yeah, so the three co-founders, myself, Andrea and Jonathan, and we've all got very different backgrounds, different ages, and CAPSLOCK, you know, we look at different elements of it. Jonathan is very entrepreneurial, did a lot of the kind of the marketing, the sales around the business. Myself and Andrea come from the cybersecurity experience of the business and the education. So the curriculum itself was developed by myself and Andrea, and we've got, you know, twinners a lot of business experience as well. But what we noticed early on, when we founded the business, we were talking a lot to potential suppliers, investors, people who we needed to work with as part of the business. And we noticed very early on that there was a bit of a theme in these meetings in terms of how many times people's names were said. So we decided to do something about it. And what we did is we monitored 18 meetings, mostly external, but one of them was our actually own internal board meeting as well with our investors, so not just external people in this, and we kept a tally. And then what we did is we analysed the results of that tally and we published those results. Actually, we did some press. We got into quite a few articles about it, because what we found on that tally was that in those 18 meetings, Andrea's name was said. You need to click for this, and
Are you ready?
big reveal, 11 times. My name was said, I think it was 17 times, and Jonathan's name was said 117 times in those 18 meetings. And these were meetings where at the beginning of the meetings we always introduce ourselves as the co-founders. We do a little bit about our background, what we do in the business. These were meetings with potential investors who were interested in the business, and a lot of these meetings were around questions around the curriculum that were actually being put to Jonathan, who was very uncomfortable at this stage because he'd not developed the curriculum and had little knowledge of it in the early days, and tried to refer it back. But it was quite an interesting thing for us to look at. And as I say, we published this because for us it was really important that we got that out there and we talked about it.
Yeah, so the tally in itself was very interesting. You know, that initial count of how many times names were said. But as Lorna said, we then published that tally. And what was even more interesting was the response to that published tally. So what did people say when they first saw this? The initial response, okay, for some people was positive. So I saw this and thought it was a great read. You know, brilliant. This relates to me. I've seen this and I feel what you're saying. Oh, this is shocking. Great that you've called out the behaviour, though. So a couple of really positive things.
Yeah, I think a lot of people actually relate to it, especially a lot of women. Yeah, you know, I'm so glad you've called this out because I suffer from this all the time. You know, I just thought it was me. So we got a lot of positive responses. However,
we got a lot of negative as well, and loads of reasons why Jonathan's name should be said 117 times and mine only 11. So some of these ranged from he has more experience.
he doesn't.
He's more vocal in meetings.
He isn't.
Well, if you've ever met Lorna, you know that's
You
not
absolutely
true.
would know that that's not true.
Yeah. He sent the email.
Sometimes he might have done, in fairness. Sometimes
Yep.
he might have sent that email.
He arranged the meeting.
Again, possibly, at times he might have arranged the meeting. I might have arranged it.
But perhaps the best for all of us was the one at the bottom. He was sitting in the middle of the picture like Jesus at the Last Supper.
So we put this, sorry, Andrew, we put this article out and we had a picture of the three of us when we'd been on an away day and Jonathan was sat in the middle. That was mostly because we kind of threw him in the middle between me and Andrea. No thought went into this, and somebody actually said, well, actually, when you're putting out a picture like that, you'll find that in art history, then somebody who's sitting in the middle, that means that they are the boss, like Jesus at the Last Supper. And that was the reason that Jonathan was perceived to be the boss of the company, because he sat in the middle on photographs. So go figure that one. I mean, we do very unkindly probably mock him for that, and he's not lived it down. We do call him Jesus in a very patronising fashion now across the business. Listen, but yeah, some really interesting sort of responses to that and ways to kind of, I suppose, justify it and not actually just accept that maybe these are learned behaviours that we all have, that we might just make assumptions. It doesn't mean that we are bad people, but actually if we could reflect on that, on those learned behaviours and learn from them, then that might make it, have more of a positive impact in the workplace especially.
Yeah, and I think it is going back to doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome.
Yeah.
So why would you bother? Why would you bother with equality? Why would you bother looking at doing things better and differently? I think on a basic level, in terms of a human level, simply it provides equal opportunity. It does give everybody a chance. It gives everybody the same chance. It generally makes good business sense because mixed teams, mixed leadership groups generally do much better than those that are not diverse at all. So you get that diversity of thought, that difference of opinion, that mix of possibility really. It improves productivity and performance. People are happier generally. Actually, if you walk into a room and it is very of one type of person, it is quite stifling. A mixture of people is much, much more energising. And people are more productive in that environment. I guess equality reduces violence and makes people, this is quite dark and sinister in that sense, but it makes places feel safer for everybody. If there's a mixture of people, actually people feel more comfortable. They feel like they fit and they feel like they belong.
Yeah, I think in terms of gender equality, it's good for the economy. It reduces poverty. Closing the pay gap actually saves money. You're looking at a company's reputation. Out there as well. It's easier to recruit. It actually keeps your customers happy as well, because actually if you've not got a diverse workforce, then it's not really representing your customers as well. Or your customers want to see that diversity. They want to see themselves in that workforce as well. So it actually helps with that customer satisfaction as well. It helps you retain staff. The diversification of decision making as well, having diversity of thought in a business, and you can't get diversity of thought unless you get people with different backgrounds, different experiences, and you've got that across the business. It really helps with that problem solving. It helps to drive innovation. Going forward as well, and it also shares that positive culture of a business. And I think what we're trying to say is that actually if you really don't care on a human level whether we are looking at diversity, then on a business level it just makes sense. It's actually proven that businesses do better by taking this approach and having that diversity across a business.
Yeah, so how do you make that change then? How do you be heard? How do you be heard in a much more positive way? Some of that is looking at your non-verbal communication, so the loudness of your voice, how you stand, how positive you are, how much eye contact you make. All those things can positively help you be heard more in a room. I think building confidence is important. We see this in the classroom every day. One of the biggest barriers to people entering a cyber career is their confidence or lack of confidence. Yeah. And actually, building confidence is a really positive thing. Seeing it as a personal journey, actually, is something you can control and something you can have a positive input into. Doubt is contagious. If you doubt yourself, other people catch it somehow.
Yeah.
Prepare for your interaction. Okay, there's nothing worse, is there? And it can be the minutest of interaction, but if you prep for a meeting you're in or an encounter you're going to have, if you have some idea about what you want to say and what you want to put across, actually you feel in a much better place.
Yeah. I think, avoiding words that cause doubt. language is so powerful, and how we use language is so powerful. You know, coming from the backgrounds that we do and looking at social engineering, social engineering is basically around manipulation and psychology, and language in that is a big part of that. But also, you know, myself, I trained as a teacher many years ago, and one of the first things we were taught around classroom management was the language that you used and how you used it to command a room. You know, so things like, you know, you would never ask a class or somebody to, you know, you would never say, can you sit down please, because that's actually, you're asking them there and the response could be no. What you would say is, sit down, thank you. And actually that's a command. You're actually commanding the room there. And I think language is very powerful, how we're using that, and avoiding those sort of words that cause doubt around, you know, I think, you know, trying to avoid think, I'm sorry, or, you know, not apologising in your language for being there and actually participating in something is really key.
Yeah, I think that feeling you've got every right to be there as much as the next person. I'm a terrible I think person. I think even when I know, I think. And so I think there you go. I think at times we're taught to kind of soften what we're delivering and not be as direct, when actually what that can do is kind of take some of the power out of what you're trying to say. So I think timing is important. Listening is important. Often people see communication as your ability to speak. It isn't. If you listen really well, you can play back what you've heard, and that can be really powerful in the room. People feel listened to and take on board what you've got to say.
It's also very hard for somebody to disagree with you if you're actually replaying what they've said in the first place.
Yeah. Not some people.
Well,
you're right.
Most people.
Yeah, speak loudly. That can be difficult as well when you're told to sit down and shut up. So speak loudly and clearly. You deserve to be heard. You deserve your place in this space. Engaging others in the room. So actually not speaking down into yourself, making sure that you're speaking to everybody and that you're commanding that space.
I think one bit of good advice as well is, especially if you're somebody who's kind of not as comfortable in these scenarios and going forward, is write it down beforehand. Sort of mentally prepare yourself for saying it as well before you go into a meeting. That can be really useful. Yeah,
practice on the dog, the cat, the kids, the trees, whatever you want. I think Lorna's right, writing it down and getting comfortable with it before you're doing it in front of people. Taking the fall quickly, something else I'm not great at but working on. I will sit back and listen for way too long. So actually putting your voice in the room early on will help people recognise that you exist and that you're there. But also remembering to support others. There is nothing better than being in a room where you feel the support of people around you. So if you're a supporting person, people are going to gain inspiration from that. It's all about asking questions and being interested, but deciding on and practicing your strategy before you've actually got to do it is really super beneficial.
It's about getting a balance of, you know, putting yourself out there and a little bit of feel the fear and do it anyway, but also something that you are comfortable with as well. So getting that balance is really important, and practicing that and kind of mentally preparing yourself ahead for something like that is really useful.
There's also the opportunity to really be a positive influence for other people. So how do you help others be heard? If you feel like your voice is one that does get heard in a room, how do you help and support others to bring people through? So if you're bringing up a new topic in a room, if you consider this, you've probably had a bit of time to think about it. You might have moved that over in your head. Actually delivering that to somebody and expecting an instant response can be quite difficult. Give them time as well. Give them time to think about it, time to come back with something and speak to you at another time. Yeah. Make requests really clear so you can be really direct with what you're asking. It does make it easier for somebody to answer. If I just said to now, what do you think about that? You'd go, I have no clue what you're asking me. Yeah. Whereas if I said a more direct question, you know, what do you think about being in a room and giving people 10 minutes to think about an answer, you know what you're asking, really. You know what the ask is. It's much easier to answer.
I think especially when you're dealing with neurodivergent people as well, that's really important. Being very clear and very precise on what it is that you're asking of them, or questions, whatever that might be. But that, as Andrea said earlier, you know, that stop talking, listening as well, that is such a key skill. You know, and a key communication skill, and not being, I suppose, scared of the silence, but also hearing all the voices in the room. I think importantly as well, just as a bit of a side for that, is actually stopping, especially if you're a decision maker in that room or somebody senior in that room, stopping, looking around that room and actually asking yourself, what voices are missing from this room? what voices are not here. You know, we're making decisions here. Are we really, actually, truly and honestly reflecting our workforce here with the people in the room that are making these decisions? Because that is key as well.
I think it's making sure you ask everybody, as Lorna said, it's not just the people who are there, it's the people who are not there, making sure there is that ask and that consultation. And I think perhaps as a last point, giving credit for input, whether you agree with it or not, it's very easy to only agree with things that align with how you think and feel. Actually, opening your mind and agreeing with things that are a bit outside your comfort zone can help others be heard and actually get their voice in the room. Do you know, interestingly, I remember being at university and we were looking in computer science, and there were probably, I don't know, in a room of 100 male students, there were maybe 7 or 8 girls, women in that classroom as well. And they were talking about how they got more of a presence in computer science. And they said, actually, what we want to do is create a girls' club. You know, we want to create a girls in computer science club. And we were like, that's amazing, that's brilliant, do it. And one of the male professors said, well, what about the boys' club? Actually,
the response was quite vocal from myself and Andrea on that. And we were the only 2 female academics actually in a team of maybe 15 in that department. And I actually think on that point you were more vocal than me.
Which didn't happen often, you're big glad to hear. But yeah, I was. I mean, it is that you're already in one. So I think asking input from everybody is important, and giving credit as well.
Yeah. I think, you know, ultimately we all have to play our part in that on an individual level for ourselves, making sure that individually, you know, if we feel we're not being heard, what can we do? Reflecting on that and what we can do. But I think as society and as business as well, you know, there's lots that we can do. And as I said earlier, you know, this is not about being criticised or a negative thing. We all have learned behaviours that we bring, and I think actually being able to be called out on those behaviours and responding in a positive manner to that is really important. At CAPSLOCK, our culture is very much that. You know, we call each other out all the time. We recognise there's learned behaviours, you know, and we all respond positively to that. Hold our hands up and say, oh yeah, you're right, I didn't even realise I'd done that, you know, I'm sorry, I'm gonna go and reflect on how I can do that better. And that is really important. But I think also being allies to others is really strong as well and really powerful, and making sure we're supporting other people and recognising maybe if they haven't got a voice in the room, can we help to support them in making their voice heard as well going forward. And I think probably the last take is, you know, I'm just going to repeat because I think it's really important, even if on a human level you don't care about equality, from a business perspective, it's just so beneficial to have diversity in your workforce, and it just makes businesses more successful. So, you know, for me, the human level should be enough, but if it isn't, then as a business, do it anyway, because you're going to be more successful. Thank you.